Stop. Before you spend another nickel, what if I told you this exact 5-cent coin could buy you a new phone? It's all about this tiny letter. Just one letter means thousands. There's something almost magical about holding a coin from 1962. This was the year John Glenn orbited the Earth. The year the Beatles released their first single. The year the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. And while all of this history was unfolding, the United States Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels, stamping Thomas Jefferson's profile onto copper-nickel planchets with mechanical precision, day after day, shift after shift. Most of those coins are still worth exactly 5 cents today. But a select few, the ones where something went catastrophically wrong during production, are now commanding prices between $69,800 and $332,000. Let that number settle in your mind for a moment. $332,000 for a nickel that's just over 60 years old. Not an ancient artifact. Not a coin from the Revolutionary War or the Civil War. Just a Jefferson nickel from the early 1960s that happened to leave the mint with errors so dramatic they transformed it from ordinary pocket change into a numismatic treasure worth more than most people's houses. The fascinating thing about 1962 is that it sits in this sweet spot of American coinage history. By this point, the mint had been producing Jefferson nickels for nearly a quarter century. The design was well established. The production process was refined and efficient. These weren't experimental coins or new designs where you might expect higher error rates. This was routine production, which makes the errors that emerged all the more remarkable. When something goes wrong in a system that's been running smoothly for decades, the results can be spectacular. The most valuable errors from 1962 involve striking mistakes that fundamentally altered the coin's appearance and physical characteristics. We're looking at wrong planchet errors where Jefferson nickel dies struck planchets intended for completely different denominations. Imagine the scenario at the Philadelphia or Denver Mint when a cent planchet somehow migrates into the nickel production line. The machinery doesn't stop to question this. The dies don't hesitate. They come down with the same force they always use, attempting to compress a nickel-sized design onto a cent-sized piece of metal. The laws of physics take over from there, creating compression, distortion, and a coin that exists in defiance of its own intended specifications. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinary to examine in person. The design elements are squeezed together, features are missing or incomplete, and the overall appearance immediately signals that something is wrong. But wrong in this context means valuable. Wrong means rare. Wrong means that collectors worldwide will compete aggressively for the chance to own such a piece. The value range from $69,000 to over $300,000 reflects not just the error itself, but the condition of the coin, the specific type of error, and how dramatic the visual impact is. Off-center strikes from 1962 represent another category of highly sought-after errors. These occur when the planchet isn't properly positioned between the dies during striking. One die comes down expecting the planchet to be perfectly centered, but instead it's shifted to one side. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing entirely, replaced by a curved blank area that shows the raw surface of the planchet. The percentage of off-center strike directly correlates to value. A slight misalignment might be worth hundreds. A 50% off-center strike could be worth tens of thousands or more, depending on condition and other factors. Double strike errors also emerged from 1962 production, though finding one today requires serious luck or serious searching. A double strike happens when a coin receives one complete strike, fails to eject from the press, and then receives a second strike, often rotated from the first. The overlapping images create visual complexity that's immediately recognizable. Jefferson's profile might appear twice, slightly offset. The inscriptions might show ghosted doubling. These coins look almost impossible, yet they exist because somewhere in the production process the timing was wrong, the ejection mechanism failed, and the dies struck twice. What elevates certain 1962 errors into six-figure territory is condition. The technical term is mint state, and it refers to coins that show no signs of circulation wear. They look essentially as they did the moment they left the dies, errors and all. Finding a dramatic error coin in mint state condition is incredibly rare because most error coins did enter circulation. They were spent, handled, passed from person to person, accumulating the tiny scratches and wear patterns that reduce grade and value. The few examples that somehow avoided circulation, that went from the mint into a collection or were set aside for some other reason, these are the specimens that command premium prices. The grading scale matters enormously when we're discussing values in the hundreds of thousands. A 1962 wrong planchet error graded MS-64 might sell for significantly less than the same error type graded MS-67. Those 3 grade points represent meaningful differences in surface preservation, strike quality, and overall eye appeal. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC evaluate these factors with extreme precision because buyers at this level demand certainty. They need to know exactly what they're purchasing, and they need authentication that the entire marketplace trusts. The market for 1962-era nickels has remained remarkably strong over decades. These aren't trendy collectibles that experience value spikes and crashes. They're genuinely rare coins with established collector demand that has proven resilient through economic cycles and market fluctuations. When major examples appear at auction through houses like Heritage or Stack's Bowers, they generate substantial bidding activity. Collectors who specialize in era coins, investors seeking tangible assets, and institutions building comprehensive collections all compete for the same pieces. The auction results often set new benchmarks and demonstrate just how much serious collectors value these errors. What I find most intriguing about the 1962 errors is how they challenge our assumptions about age and value in numismatics. We tend to think older automatically means more valuable. But a 1962 era nickel in pristine condition can be worth vastly more than coins that are centuries older. Age is just one factor. Rarity, condition, visual impact, and collector demand all play crucial roles in determining value. The 1962 errors excel in all these categories, which is why they command the prices they do. For anyone who collects coins or who inherited old coin collections, 1962 Jefferson nickels deserve careful examination. Look for anything unusual about the size, weight, or appearance. Compare them to other nickels to see if something seems off. Check for off-center strikes, doubling effects, or design elements that look compressed or distorted. Most 1962 nickels are common coins worth face value, but the small percentage with genuine errors could represent life-changing discoveries. The reality is that valuable error coins are still out there, sitting in old collections, hiding in inherited coin jars, waiting to be discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. The 1962 Jefferson nickel errors prove that you don't need ancient coins to find significant value. You just need the right coin in the right condition with the right error. And if you're fortunate enough to find one, you're holding a piece of minting history worth a small fortune. Imagine walking into a bank in 1947 with a roll of newly minted Jefferson nickels in your pocket. The war is over. America is rebuilding. The economy is transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity. Those nickels jingling in your pocket represent more than just 50 cents. They represent a nation getting back to normal, resuming the ordinary rhythms of commerce and daily life. And hidden among those ordinary nickels, completely unnoticed by anyone at the time, were coins with errors so significant they would eventually be valued at $88,000 on the conservative end, reaching all the way up to $394,000 for the finest examples. Nearly $400,000. For a nickel. From 1947. A coin that someone probably used to buy a newspaper or a cup of coffee, completely unaware they were spending what would become a fortune. That's the thing about error coins from this era. They weren't recognized for what they were. They circulated freely, changed hands thousands of times, and only decades later did collectors begin to understand their true significance and value. The year 1947 holds special importance in American coinage history for reasons that go beyond the errors themselves. This was only the 9th year of Jefferson nickel production, and more significantly, it was the first full year of nickel production after World War II ended. During the war years, nickel had been a strategic metal needed for the war effort, which led to the famous wartime composition nickels made from silver, copper, and manganese. By 1947, the mint had returned to the traditional copper-nickel composition, and production was ramping up to meet civilian demand that had been suppressed during wartime rationing and material shortages. The Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all working to produce enough nickels for an economy that was expanding rapidly. Veterans were returning home, starting families, buying houses, launching the post-war boom that would define the next 2 decades. The demand for coinage was enormous, and the mints responded by running their presses continuously. In that environment of high-volume production and transitional metal compositions, errors were perhaps more likely than during more stable periods. The machinery was being pushed hard. The workers were managing massive output. Quality control, while generally effective, couldn't catch everything. The errors that emerged from 1947 production runs tell stories about those specific moments when the system failed. Wrong planchet errors represent some of the most dramatic and valuable mistakes from this year. When a planchet intended for a different denomination somehow makes its way into the nickel striking chamber, you get a coin that shouldn't exist according to any official specification. The dies designed for nickel-sized planchets come down with tremendous force, meeting a planchet of the wrong size, wrong weight, wrong composition. The metal responds to this mismatch by deforming in ways that create unique visual characteristics that immediately identify the coin as an error. These wrong planchet strikes from 1947 are particularly prized because the planchet compositions from that era were different from modern coins. We're dealing with actual copper-nickel alloy, not the copper-nickel clad composition used today. The metallurgy is different, the color is slightly different, and to experienced collectors, these vintage errors have an aesthetic quality that modern errors sometimes lack. There's a patina, a look, a feel to 1947 nickels that announces their age. When that vintage appearance combines with a dramatic error, you get something truly special. Off-center strikes from 1947 showcase the violence of the minting process in frozen detail. When a planchet isn't properly seated in the collar die, when it's shifted even slightly from its intended position, the striking dies don't adjust or compensate. They descend with the same force regardless, striking whatever portion of the planchet happens to be beneath them. The result is a coin where half of Jefferson's profile might be missing, where the date might be partially off the planchet, where the words Monticello on the reverse might be cut off mid-letter. These coins are accidents frozen in metal, physical evidence of mechanical processes going wrong at high speed. The value range from $88,000 to $394,000 reflects multiple factors working in combination. The type of error matters enormously. A dramatic 50% off-center strike will command different prices than a wrong planchet error. The condition is absolutely critical. A coin that somehow avoided circulation and remains in mint state condition will sell for multiples of what a circulated example brings. The specific grade assigned by professional services like PCGS or NGC can mean the difference between a 5-figure coin and a 6-figure coin. Even within mint state, the difference between MS-64 and MS-67 represents thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in value. What makes authentication so crucial for 1947 errors is the combination of age and value. These coins are old enough that their surfaces have aged, developed patina, accumulated the subtle characteristics that come with 70-plus years of existence. Distinguishing between genuine mint errors and post-mint damage or alteration requires expertise that only professional graders possess. They examine these coins under high magnification, studying the flow lines in the metal, looking for evidence of how the error occurred, verifying that the characteristics match what genuine mint errors from 1947 should display. This authentication isn't optional when you're dealing with coins in this value range. It's absolutely essential. The marketplace for high-grade 1947 error nickels operates at the highest levels of numismatics. These aren't coins that change hands casually or appear frequently at local coin shows. When premium examples come to auction at major houses, they're featured prominently in catalog descriptions. Pre-auction publicity generates interest among serious collectors who specialize in error coins or who are building comprehensive date sets of Jefferson nickels. The bidding can be intense, competitive, and sometimes unpredictable. Two collectors who both need a specific 1947 error to complete their sets might drive the price well beyond estimates. That's the nature of truly rare coins. When you need it and it's available, price becomes secondary to acquisition. For anyone fortunate enough to own old coin collections or to inherit coins from family members who collected in the mid-20th century, 1947 Jefferson nickels deserve very careful examination. These coins are old enough that they might have been set aside when they were still relatively new. Someone in 1950 or 1960 who was casually collecting might have saved some 1947 nickels without realizing that one or more had significant errors. Those coins could be sitting in old albums, wrapped in paper, stored in boxes in attics or basements, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their value. The lesson from the 1947 Jefferson nickel errors is that value in numismatics comes from multiple sources working together. Age alone doesn't create value. Rarity alone isn't enough. Condition matters, but so does visual impact. Historical significance plays a role, but so does collector demand. When all these factors align, when you have a rare error from a significant year in exceptional condition, you get coins worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The 1947 errors represent that perfect alignment, which is why they command the extraordinary prices they do in today's market. Everything changed in 1964, not just in American coinage, but in the very fabric of how the United States Mint operated. This was the last year, the final moment before the great silver shortage forced the government to fundamentally alter the composition of dimes and quarters. It was a year of transition, of endings and beginnings, of the old monetary system giving way to something new. And right in the middle of this upheaval, the Mint was producing Jefferson nickels that, for the most part, looked exactly like every other Jefferson nickel made since 1938. Except some of them didn't. Some of them carried errors so significant that today they're valued between $72,880 and $290,990. That upper number deserves repeating. $290,990. We're $10 away from $300,000 for a nickel that's 60 years old. A coin that could have bought you a candy bar or a comic book in 1964 is now worth more than most luxury homes. The mathematics of that appreciation are almost incomprehensible, but they're real, documented in auction records and private sales that have established 1,964 error nickels as some of the most valuable modern error coins in existence. What makes 1964 particularly significant isn't just what was happening with nickels, but what was happening across the entire American coinage system. The mint was in crisis mode. Silver prices were rising, coin shortages were developing, and there was a growing recognition that the traditional silver coinage couldn't continue much longer. Production volumes were pushed to extremes trying to meet demand. The Denver and Philadelphia mints were running essentially nonstop, churning out billions of coins. In that environment of maximum production pressure and transitional chaos, quality control inevitably suffered in small but significant ways. The errors that escaped detection during this period tell us something important about industrial processes under stress. When you're producing coins at the absolute limit of your capacity, when every press is running continuously, when worker fatigue becomes a factor, when the focus is on quantity because the nation desperately needs more coins in circulation, that's when errors slip through. A planchet that shouldn't be in the nickel line doesn't get noticed because everyone is focused on keeping production moving. An off-center strike doesn't get caught because the inspectors are overwhelmed with volume. These aren't excuses. They're explanations for how coins worth hundreds of thousands of dollars ended up in circulation. The wrong planchet errors from 1964 represent some of the most valuable pieces in the entire error coin marketplace. When you find a 1964 Jefferson nickel struck on a dime planchet, you're looking at a coin that combines multiple forms of rarity. It's a wrong denomination error, which is already rare. It's from a historically significant year. And if it happens to be in high-grade mint state condition, which very few are, you're potentially looking at a six-figure coin. The dies designed to strike nickels came down expecting to meet a copper-nickel planchet of specific dimensions and thickness. Instead, they encountered a dime planchet, smaller and lighter. The resulting coin shows compression of the design, incomplete striking of peripheral details, and physical characteristics that immediately identify it as something extraordinary. Broad strike errors from 1964 showcase a different kind of mechanical failure. The collar die, which normally constrains the planchet and gives the coin its proper diameter, wasn't in position during striking. Without that constraint, the metal spread outward under the tremendous pressure of the dies, creating a coin that's wider and thinner than standard specifications allow. These broad strikes have an immediate visual impact. They look wrong even to untrained eyes. The diameter is noticeably larger, the edge is irregular instead of reeded, and the overall appearance signals that something went seriously awry during production. Off-center strikes from 1964 vary dramatically in both degree and value. A slight off-center strike, maybe 5 or 10%, is interesting but not exceptionally valuable. But when you get into dramatic off-center strikes where 30, 40, 50% of the design is missing, replaced by blank planchet showing the curved edge where the coin wasn't engaged with the dies, you're looking at significant money. The most dramatic examples, where the date is barely on the coin or where Jefferson's profile is half missing, these command premium prices because they're visually spectacular. Collectors want errors that tell an obvious story, and extreme off-center strikes do exactly that. The value range from $72,000 to $290,000 reflects the critical importance of condition in error coin valuation. A 1964 wrong planchet error that circulated that was spent and handled and accumulated where might be worth tens of thousands. The exact same error type in pristine mint state 67 or 68 condition could be worth 10 times that amount. This is why professional grading becomes absolutely essential for valuable errors. The difference between MS 65 and MS 67 isn't just 2 grade points. It's potentially $100,000 or more in market value. PCGS and NGC have established themselves as the definitive authorities on error coin authentication and grading. When they certify a 1964 Jefferson nickel error, they're not just confirming the error is genuine. They're providing a detailed assessment of the coin's condition, its strike quality, its surface preservation, and its overall eye appeal. That certification gets encapsulated with the coin in a tamper-evident holder that protects it from environmental damage and provides confidence to buyers that what they're purchasing has been independently verified by experts. The auction history of premium 1964 error nickels demonstrates sustained collector demand at the highest levels. When these coins appear at heritage auctions, Stax Bowers, or other major houses. They're featured in high-quality photography that captures every detail. Lot descriptions explain the error, provide historical context, and highlight condition factors that justify the estimates. Pre-auction interest can be substantial, with serious collectors examining the coins in person during lot viewing or requesting additional photographs. The bidding itself often involves multiple determined collectors competing for the same piece, driving prices to levels that sometimes surprise even experienced dealers. What fascinates me about 1964 errors is their position at a historical crossroads. This was the end of an era in American coinage. The following year brought clad coins, new compositions, changes that marked a clear before and after in numismatic history. The 1964 errors represent the last gasp of the old system, mistakes made during a moment of transition and stress. That historical positioning adds a layer of significance that collectors find compelling. These aren't just errors. They're errors from a year that matters, a year that marked the end of something and the beginning of something else. For anyone examining 1964 Jefferson Nickels, the search requires patience and knowledge. You're looking for anything that deviates from standard specifications. Check the diameter against other nickels. Feel the weight if possible. Examine the strike carefully for any indication of off-center alignment or design compression. Look at the edge to see if it shows the normal reading or something irregular. Most 1964 nickels are common coins worth face value, but the small percentage with genuine significant errors could represent discoveries that change your financial situation fundamentally. The truth about error coins is that they're still waiting to be found. Not in huge numbers, but they're out there. In old collections assembled decades ago by people who didn't know what they had. In inherited coin jars that nobody has examined carefully. In bank vaults where original mint-wrapped rolls from 1964 might still exist. The 1964 Jefferson nickel errors prove that extraordinary value can hide in ordinary-looking coins, waiting for someone with enough knowledge and attention to detail to recognize them for what they truly are.